The West Australian newspaper this morning has produced a terrific Anzac wraparound. Would certainly recommend getting your hands on it and having a read if you haven't done so already. But there's a story written by their senior writer, Malcolm Queckett, which we want to learn a little bit more about. My next guest on the program has set herself and a whole bunch of dedicated volunteers quite the task. It's a project to name every West Australian who died in World War I. Shannon Lovelady is an archivist and a local historian, and she joins me on the line. Shannon, good morning.
Good morning, Karen.
Thanks for your time today.
Pleasure.
This is quite a project. What was its genesis?
Probably 5 years ago in June 2013, when the focus was shifting towards Gallipoli, and people were talking about how great the losses were there, and yet my own research showed how much more the Western Front lost. And I just wanted to know the numbers because I was astounded to find that nobody knew the actual numbers that we were talking about. So I started the Gallipoli Dead from Western Australia project to determine how many West Australians were killed as a result of their service at Gallipoli. And we did that and finished that at the end of 2014. And then naturally I had to turn to the Western Front. So we did that one as well.
So that's quite interesting. Was it the case that no one knew the numbers nationally, or we did know nationally but no one had ever broken it down by state?
No one actually does know the actual numbers, and yeah, we are the only state to know that number.
Wow. How did you go? And spoiler alert, we'll get to the number at the end. But how did you start to go about this process? What was involved?
Well, first of all, I extracted the data from the Commonwealth War Graves Commission, searching for any grave of any West Australian buried worldwide, and then. Sorry, my son's just turned the kettle on in the kitchen. Oh, it's lovely, isn't it? And then we transcribed the entire State War Memorial at Kings Park.
Yep. And
got every name there. 1 second. So sorry.
No problem at all. And real life continues. This is live radio.
Real life does indeed. At least the dogs aren't barking.
Correct.
And then every honour roll from any battalion that fought from Western Australia. We transcribed those and checked those. And we ended up, for Gallipoli, with a list of about 5,000 people we went through. And for the Western Front, it was about 8,000.
Okay.
So between us, we've probably gone through nearly 20,000 records in sorting out who these men are.
This wasn't an undertaking that you went through alone?
No, it certainly wasn't. I wouldn't have been able to do it on my own. I had a team in the end of about 70 volunteers. So we had probably 50 transcription volunteers who extracted the data that we needed to determine whether a soldier was eligible. And the eligible criteria are in the West, but to explain them, we had to be having a list of people who were born in Western Australia or who had enlisted from Western Australia or who had lived here for some time, and their deaths must have been caused as a result of their service on the Western Front, or for the Gallipoli list, as a result of their service on Gallipoli. So that's the criteria that we followed, and those 50 volunteers extracted, their birthplaces, what they died from, their next of kin, marital status, appearance, and so on. Then I had another 20 people or so in the higher assessment panel who helped me determine the eligibility for tricky cases, and the medical assessment panel who went through the files forensically and determined whether the cause of death was caused by war service or not, because I'm not medically trained, and so I turned to people who knew better than I.
So what do the files actually describe about causes of death? Do they categorise them in the way that you did, or did it require a sort of another layer of interpretation?
They do pretty much categorise them the way that we did, and those ways are, killed in action, declared missing but later declared killed in action, died of wounds, died of illness, died of disease, and suicide, accident, and so on. There are a few that died from other causes, and they just don't fit easily into those categories.
So What did you learn? Perhaps if we go the overall number first, and then perhaps break it down for us into the various theatres of conflict.
Sure. Maths is not my strong point, ironically enough. Mass data is my strong point, and so I can do it theatre by theatre more effectively, I think.
Sure.
For Gallipoli, we had 1,024, but I believe that is going up to 1,025 next week.
I see.
With one of my researchers having presented one that's fallen through the cracks, who was neither born here nor enlisted from here, but lived here for some time.
Right.
So that's 1,024 at the moment. And ironically, most of those were born in the UK and Victoria.
Oh.
And they were the early enlistees. And the thing that changed for the Western Front is that most were born in WA over the UK and Victoria. So as the war went on, more West Australians actually enlisted rather than the Eastern Staters and English, United Kingdom people.
That's very interesting.
It was. The other thing that was absolutely amazing is the files for the Gallipoli project earlier on. The women and the female voice was very apologetic, and it begged for forgiveness for intruding these important army people in bothering them for a photo of their son's grave, or begging them for their son's effects that might have gone down on a ship, torpedoed by the enemy.
Wow.
And these distraught mothers just saying how sorry they were to interrupt these busy men.
God.
But for the Western Front, it was immediately obvious that these women had found their voice, and they became far more assertive. And, some of them say, it's been 3 months since you told me my son has been killed in action, and it's about time you sent me his effects. It's before time, I heard something more, and I want a photo of his grave. They really did find their voices through these ongoing months of war.
That's so interesting. I wonder if that reflects perhaps a general sense of public fatigue, or certainly a change of attitude towards the war as it wore on into its second, third, fourth years.
Yep, and as the losses were felt at home.
Yeah.
And women who were, they knew they were expected to give their sons and husbands up for war, but it didn't mean that it got any easier as they saw those losses mounting. And of course, with the Western Front, yes, we lost 1,024 at Gallipoli over 8 months, and that's a shocking loss. But, the whole battalions were almost lost in 24 hours on the Somme.
Mm. Yeah. And so the number for the Western Front is about 5,200, is that right?
5,203.
Right, okay.
At the moment, that will go up by about probably 10, if I'm being safe, either side, as each case is determined. I've still got 3 that need to be assessed by the medical forensic team. And, going through and finding some duplicates, because some men enlisted under assumed names. So in some cases, they have 2 records currently in my list.
It's so interesting that more than 100 years on in many cases that the official record can continue to reveal new facts.
Yes, and we will finally know that number. And again, I just am so proud of the fact that we're the only state to know that number. And, I would gladly do the rest of Australia, but I don't think I have time right now. But we should know that number exactly.
What's the motivation to do something like this from your point of view and all of those 70-odd people helping you?
I think we all just thought, like I did, that we needed to know. And I couldn't believe that we didn't know, especially when people, really banged on about how bad those losses were, but they didn't know who they were. And of course, some of the names on the War Memorial, they weren't sure whose names are on there. So I thought that would be a great thing to give the RSL and the trustees for the Kings Park War Memorial, because now they will have a comprehensive list of exactly who is on the War Memorial and exactly what unit they fought with and so on. And that's another side effect of this project. We'll have 156 new names to add to that War Memorial at the end of this year for the armistice commemorations. 156 names that their families didn't put on for various reasons, but they are certainly eligible to be on those plaques.
Interesting. Do you know what Western Australia's population was during the Great War years, 14 to 18, roughly?
I don't.
Yeah.
No.
It's interesting. It would be fascinating to know. I mean, 6,424 people overall, potentially rising for the reasons that you've described. It's hard to get your head around that number, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And that's Well, that's one of the benefits of this project is that somebody else will be able to study this data and apply it to things like population enlistments and so on, and take it further, take it wherever they want to. I want this research to be out and available to anybody who wants to consult it. The RSL has generously agreed to roll it out through their branches statewide, beginning with headquarters later this year. And so everybody will be able to access this data and the research notes and so on their ancestor or their family member or any soldier that they're interested in. And for the purposes of mass study and research, then they'll be able to undertake that using this data.
Is there another project that you might have in mind when this is eventually concluded, or does this one continue to sort of be reinterrogated, to continue to go on?
This one will draw to a close. I will have a full list of names by the Armistice Centenary, broken into unit or whatever, actually. We can break it into anything. Yeah. I'll have that by November, and so by the end of this year, this project will be complete, but it will never be closed because of that third criteria, that they must have lived here for some time. Yeah. And those men are the ones who are the hardest to pin down because they don't necessarily appear on war memorials. They don't necessarily have anything in their record to indicate that they were in Western Australia. But if family members believe a person should be there, then we will always look at them and include them if valid, like, for example, that 1025th man for the Gallipoli dead.
A lot of painstaking work, I have no doubt about that, for you and all of the fellow volunteers who have dedicated your spare time to doing it. It's just an amazing undertaking.
It was mammoth, and we said we ate an elephant with the Gallipoli project. I can't think what the equivalent is for the Western Front, but without people like the WA Genealogical Society and all of those volunteers, it wouldn't have been possible. And I'm just so grateful that they all thought like I did, and we got it done.
Shannon, well done.
Thank you very much, Gareth.
Good on you, Shannon Lovelady. What a great project! What a great woman. And lots of other volunteers as well, as you heard Shannon say, very quick to share the credit with around 70 people who've helped her out on it. But it's interesting, isn't it, the way that the historic record can continue to be re-examined so that we better understand exactly what happened. We have more knowledge about the facts, and these things can still emerge. But, it's a volunteer project. It helps us understand the history of our state and of our nation better. And so for that, on this Anzac Day, we give thanks as well.